So question 2 is actually about fostering collaboration. So how can companies foster a culture of collaboration between the designers and IT? So, to ensure that the technology supports the design vision. So maybe for start, Paul, would you like to take up this topic? Yeah.
It's more an organizational question, right? How do you create your organization with the right culture for collaboration rather than a problem that can be solved using technology? Again, technology is an enabler, but the solution, I think, is more of culture and organization, right? Because the designers and IT, I think of that as a more technologically driven versus more design driven group of people. And how do you then cultivate the right sense of their main objectives and then bring them into one solution? And that's the challenge, because the two groups of people that are mentioned here are very different in terms of their thinking process. I'm actually reminded of my personal experience 20 years ago when I started. I began as a UI designer, actually, a programmer UI designer. And I remember creating a touch panel for a user. And I'm a computer science by training. I approached that project like an engineer.
Yeah.
Oh, there are this many people with this many features. So if I make the buttons this size, I can fit all of them in one page. And ended up with literally 50 different buttons on that screen. That was my first panel. And obviously my project manager and the designer of that project held me back and said, "Paul, this is crazy. Nobody thinks like this." And that was my personal sort of introduction to, not everyone thinks like an engineer. And over the years, I feel like I've gained in a perspective from different areas to understand that not everyone, not engineers, oftentimes make choices that's easy for them because that's intuitive to them, but that's not how everyone thinks, right? So creating an organization of empathy, because it comes down to understanding other people's perspective, and just being aware that there is a different perspective is a great first step in cultivating conversation and understanding. So with that cultivation of organization of empathy, I think then next step is then how do you take specific measures to foster collaboration, right? So I think it comes down to, from my organization's perspective, we often have what we call voices of customer sessions. And we try to reach out to different stakeholders of different technical capabilities. Someone who's really steeped into specs and understand how many ports, how many processors need something for this application, to people who are just using the products and solutions in an environment.
Yeah, so I think IT professionals and designers fundamentally have different objectives. As a system integrator, whenever there's a fit-out project, unfortunately, we're really one of the last few people to get into that. And a lot of the time, the design element is something which has already decided long before us, right? And we are the ones that have to make adjustments, to make sure that everything fits. So different colors of microphones, different textures and stuff. Oh, I don't like that shape. Oh, that can't be there. That messes with the lighting. We get all of that, right? And it comes down to our knowledge of technology to try to overcome those problems. But because we're always there when these things happen, we learn about these things, right? We learn the lessons, the difficulties, and what happens when you don't take into account the design considerations before the technology considerations, right? So, what we try to do as a system integrator is that we don't want to walk into a meeting and say, I have this technology, you can do this, it's great, it's the latest stuff, right? You should use it. But we try to bring these considerations and these lessons that we've learned and say, look, perhaps, before putting this technology in, you should consider some elements of the room design. I've seen, what you've done. Perhaps you should think about it more deeply. And I think this is where we can add value, right? And traditionally, it's not really been something that, traditional system integrators try to do. We are so focused on products, we are so focused on, what we're comfortable working with in our own ecosystem, that we lose sight of the bigger goal, which is basically, although, these two departments have different objectives fundamentally, the end goal is the same, right? They want it to look great, and they want it to work well, and they want people that use it every day to be happy, right?
Chris, when you bring up that collaborative approach into designing a solution,
Yep.
do you find that end users, the people, your customers, are receptive to your efforts to, right? Because since they're still that far down into the design process, how has that been?
I'm pretty persuasive, but I have to admit it doesn't always go swimmingly, right? They don't necessarily always listen, but I always try to gently put across a perspective that we work with this technology on a daily basis, so we know what's possible and what's not. The end user has idea in mind or what they want to achieve overall, but they do not necessarily know what the limitations of the technology is, right? So from an advisory perspective, what we try to do is we really try to be like a partner. We really try to be like a little bit more consultant rather than a system integrator, right? So the role that we play has to continually evolve, from what we used to do, right? So it's pretty exciting for us.
Let me take the blame for the architecture industry here. I take full.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I've been waiting so long. Thank you.
I take full responsibility because honestly, architects and interior designers have always sort of seen design in two buckets, right? They've seen it as creative design discipline and technical design discipline. And they've always put IT, MEP, all these folks in the technical design discipline bucket. But I've always felt that technology needs to be part of the creative design process. When I say that, it's conceptual design, right? And my experience has been that our designers will go and create these beautiful renders, and I'll look at the render and I'll see this image of this weird floating image in the middle of the screen, and I'll ask the designer, what is that? And they'll say, oh, it's a hologram. Like, it just happens, right? There's no consulting. They don't know exactly what it's supposed to be. They just put it there, and when we show an AV designer, they're like, well, yeah, you can't really do that. And so the idea that you can just kind of come up with these ideas without any sort of industry expertise is ridiculous. And so I've pushed for the emergence of sort of what we call creative technologists that are IT, AV professionals in the design process, along with interior designers, along with graphic designers, along with the strategists, because now more and more technology becomes an integral part of an overarching design process. And so that collaboration really starts from that beginning point, because we can't relegate technology to be an add-on at the end. But honestly, that's how architecture always treated it in the past. Is it's, hey, listen, we know those rooms need something, we'll figure that out later, but we just want to make art, right? So, but I think now, because technology is driving so much of what we're doing these days, you can't leave it to the end anymore. So having a technologist there to talk about the value of those things versus just having someone just build a screen on a wall, not accounting for things like a camera position, not accounting things for lighting, especially when you've got smart camera systems now that will follow people around, and no one's accounting for the backlight or the windows that you're seeing. So there's all of these dependencies that technology needs to be part of the conceptual discussions up front. So like I said, the architecture industry needs to change and embrace technology and technology design up front. And so hopefully that's a conversation that will keep moving forward. So.
Yeah. No, it's perfect, and it's great to hear it. And picking up from Paul's point, it is an organizational thing, right? So, and I love that phrase, foster a culture of collaboration. Because what do we really have in that? Because every company wants a great corporate culture, ingredient A. Everybody wants effective collaboration, ingredient B. So you've taken A and B, the unknown ingredients, force them into the business blender, hit frappe on the mystery smoothie to see what comes out. Because we don't actually define that. A lot of organizations struggle to build a great culture. A lot of organizations struggle to define effective collaboration. And for me, I think if you want to foster this, and regardless of it being design and IT and these different parties, just boil it back down to basics and start defining what productive collaboration should be. And I honestly believe that is being able to express your ideas and your thoughts in a safe and engaging environment, to be heard and understood. because you can listen to somebody and not understand a word that they're saying. And you can understand somebody and kind of not pay attention and not realize how important it is. So to be heard and understood. And then from that engagement, that collaborative session, come out with a productive outcome, a step to do anything. Because to Paul's point, otherwise you've not had productivity. It's been a great conversation. Yeah, I've heard and I've understood you. What do we do now? I don't know, right? That's not productive collaboration. So when you look at productive collaboration, and let's apply those two metrics to design and IT, and think about that, being heard and understood. You've now got an IT guy who needs to really sit down and listen to a conversation that's very different with a design team, really listen and engage, and then understand and ask questions. What do you mean when you say that? Why has it got to be like that? I don't necessarily understand. You have to open up quite a lot to be able to admit you don't know these things. And I think this is where it comes back to corporate culture and saying it's fine for you to ask those questions. That's why we're here, because that's going to be the productive outcome. So having those conversations with both sides agreeing, right, we're going to come out of this and we've got a clear way for it. That is how you're going to start to get that effective, productive collaboration between the design teams. It's about opening up. You know, when I think about my career in 20 years and consulting, when I was originally doing this in technology, it was translating what IT was saying to the C-suite, and translating what C-suite wants back down to the IT suite. That's changed in the last few years. I've had to add another language in there, which is design. So now I have to take the C-suite, I have to convert and translate what they want to design from a tech perspective, and then convert and say what they want to IT, and they've got now a three-way conversation in three different languages. So, and I think, again, just being open and saying to people that I don't understand, I want to understand, to come to that outcome, we'll really get great results going forward.
Yeah, and the technology has changed and is influencing everything. You mentioned something about people having wires that are hanging or not considering those kinds of things, but it's even because you've got things like direct view LEDs versus LCD screens. If architects don't understand that, they're not building the right kinds of enclosures, they're not building the right kind of active or passive ventilation, they're not thinking about the things that are going to actually support a lot of that. Half the time it's like they're not even putting an IDF room anywhere close to where you need to actually have it be. So it's just a critical part of the design process. It's not something that can really wait till you've designed you've fixed a floor plan and then pull somebody in to consult on it. And too often that's the case.
Tim, yeah. I love how the Tim, who represents designer side of the equation, mentions more about technology and functions and features than the manufacturer. And I think it's a great indication of where the industry is headed, right? We are reaching across the line and trying to understand where each other are coming from. So I think it's also, this conversation is a great indication of our industry heading in the right direction.
There is a whole part about EQ, and I was saying this because there is, I say to people, feel makes it real, right? It's you can explain something so much to certain people, again, being heard, that they don't necessarily understand why it's important, again, go through that. And sometimes you can say that so much and it still won't get home. I've had this situation in fact, internally. One of the things I had at CBRE, I was trying to explain how with one of the legacy technology setups that we'd got, when a visitor came in, that they needed to connect their laptop to use our wireless display system, it was a bad experience. And I was trying to explain all these reasons why and using sort of technical jargon to IT, and they were kind of looking at me like, yeah, so what? So I actually got the head of IT in the room with me, and I gave him my personal laptop with PowerPoint on it. And I sat down in a meeting with him and I said, look, I just want you to connect this laptop to that screen, and I'm going to start a timer. I'm going to start the timer. And he's clicking through the process, and he goes through the guest Wi-Fi log on, that fill in a form, then get a SMS passcode, and then do this, and then it's coming on, and then he figures out, oh, right, to add it here, I don't have Zoom installed. This is a Zoom setup, and I don't have the software. Okay, right, now I've got to open the web page, and I'm connected, and I've got to enter the 16-digit. 3 minutes, 30 seconds later, in that process, end to end, the presentation's on the screen, and I say, right, now You understood all of those processes. You were partial to them. But as somebody coming into this organization, imagine, I said, how do you feel right now? He said, I feel pretty stressed. And I said, imagine if you were coming in here to present for a tender. Imagine if you were coming here to present to me or one of our clients. They've had to sit through that. The feel made it real. And they said, yeah, you're right. We need a better process for this. And that helped give him a better understanding to be able to go back to the wider business and explain in a language and a translation that he could do better in terms of those corporate standards, to explain why we needed to change and adapt that. So I think, that's always something we consider, because coming back to your point about cognitive empathy, only 2 to 3% of the population have a registered high on like cognitive empathy. That's a really low number. So if you bear in mind you have 100 conversations with people, 3% are really good at understand and feel your pain point. 3 people, right? So if you take that away from it, I think we have to find some other ways to really engage to break through that barrier.
You mentioned something else that I think is important to point out, is that any lines that existed between IT and AV are virtually gone. Now it's basically the overlap between AV and IT is full time now, where you basically every device you're putting in is IP addressable. So IT has to be involved with every decision you make. And I say that because typically in a project you've got the corporate IT department sort of set up separately, and you're having conversations about connectivity, but not necessarily connecting that to the AV design teams. And AV and IT have to be actively involved in those conversations from the very beginning as well.
So yeah, it's really, really very diverse range, of opinions on this topic and things like that. I think it was a very, very fruitful conversation between all of you. We all face challenges in certain aspects. And of course, it's like how we actually try to overcome those circumstances and things like that.